business leaders face uncertainty and volatility. Non-humans are entering the workplace, memes control the stock market, and geopolitics is a business concern. Disruption isn't a future concept, it's here. I am Justin Brady, and using 7,000 predictions and 12 major workplace trends from SHRM, you and I will sit down with psychologists, CEOs, scientists, entrepreneurs, and analysts to make sense of it all. This show isn't about the future, it's about actions to take tomorrow. This is Tomorrowist. I'm Justin Brady, and CEOs and leaders, we're talking to you right now. There is a really, really good chance, and I'm actually not making this up at all. There is a really good chance you're being hacked right now. Right now. There's a really, really good chance, and it'll probably be about 197 days until you even figure it out. And that's why we've invited Theresa Payton, the CEO of Fortalice Solutions and the former CIO and first woman CIO in the White House under the George W. Bush administration, to talk about cybersecurity threats and what leaders need to do. Theresa, thank you so much for coming on Tomorrowist.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
It's a dizzying one, and I'll admit it goes over a lot of leaders' heads. It's quite terrifying. And so we got to be honest with everybody. Are breaches more a matter of when, not if? Like, is proactive even possible?
Proactive is helpful because being no, it is a matter of when. It is. And being proactive is helpful because it will most likely minimize your damages, minimize your downtime, minimize your penalties, and help you maintain a stellar reputation. The companies that do the best job preparing in advance, you just like you can't stop a hurricane, an earthquake from happening, you can prepare for it. You can create building codes for it, and you can withstand it and be resilient. That's the same thing with fighting fraudsters and cyber criminals and nation states and all the different varieties that could be attacking your company and the people who work at the company. And so being proactive makes a huge difference in your recovery. Chances are, in some cases, you may actually be able to stop an attack before there are damages, but assume that you will not be able to. And it's all about being resilient and recoverable.
I mean, that's a good, resilient, recoverable is actually leads me into my big question, which is obviously executives, IT leaders need to plan to prevent. They'd be foolish not to, but it's basically battle plan out, red team, blue team, or basically battle plan out when a breach happens. Here's what to do. Is this the suggestion?
It is. And, we work all the time with companies to help them think through those playbooks. The playbook should, if you don't have time to do a very extensive playbook, at a minimum, you should have one part of the playbook that says, our data has been stolen. It doesn't have to be a ransomware incident, just our data has been stolen. And now we have to do disclosures. What does that playbook look like? Another one is an attack is imminent. We don't know the extent of the attack, but we're probably going to have to tell somebody. Maybe you're a publicly traded company, so you've got those disclosures you have to do. Even privately held companies, you may have somebody you need to notify, your customers, the regulators in the states or the countries you do business, your shareholders, even if you're privately held. So be thinking about in that playbook, what will we do if we think we have an attack underway? How will we respond? How will we cordon it off? How will we mitigate it? What do notifications look like? Now, if you have time to do a little bit more, I would say assume a ransomware combined with an extortionware attempt. Okay, fine. You don't want to pay the ransom. That's fine. But we have your data and we're going to dump it on the internet unless you pay us. Have a playbook for that. Have another one that your intellectual property has been stolen. And then lastly, I would say, based on one of my predictions for 2025, if you have any buildings that are smart buildings that have lots of Internet of Things devices installed, my prediction is by the end of 2025, ransomware syndicates are going to move to buildings, lock people in and hold them for ransom, and not let them out until you pay the ransom. So those would be the different chapters in the playbook, if you will, that I recommend all businesses create. It only costs you really time to create that. You don't have to hire consultants, you don't have to buy products, but it'll be a good idea to sort of create those scenarios, rehearse them, and that'll help inform any kind of additional investments you need to make.
I think every leader hearing this, maybe proactive leaders, are probably like, okay, fine. I understand battle planning out when a breach happens. Let's say there's a CEOs out there that are very, very leading edge on this. And they're like, Teresa, we've already battle planned out when a cyber hack happens. We're prepared for it. We know the reality is that it's almost 100% chance. But you just threw a curveball, which is okay, that's great. Congratulations. You also need to have a physical battle plan. You just mentioned people being locked in offices. So cybersecurity threats aren't necessarily just virtual and data anymore. You're suggesting, or not even suggesting, you're saying cybersecurity threats are now physical threats.
Yeah, they are. The convergence. Here's the thing, many companies are doing such a great job handling ransomware and extortionware, not having to pay. The ransomware syndicates are paying them a lot less than maybe they did in the past. And what you need to know about ransomware syndicates is the harder we make it on them, they don't just wake up and say, it's really tough to live this life of crime. Maybe I should reconsider, be a good person and bake pies for my neighbor. No, that's not what they do. What they do is say, okay, clearly I have to change my tactics, my tools, my process and procedures. What's going to be easy? Because remember, they're not just evildoers, they're also lazy. They like to do wash, rinse, repeat. As long as they know they're not probably not going to get caught and they're going to have a big payday, they just want to do wash, rinse, repeat. So they're just going to say, well, what would be easier than going after corporate systems? Well, maybe I can go after the humans. Oh gosh, companies are locking down the account takeover compromise vector. Okay. You know what? Why don't I just lock people in buildings? And then I'll just do things like if they have Internet of Things, automatically flushing toilets connected to the internet, I'll just flush all those. I'll turn off the heat or I'll turn off the AC. I'll turn off the electricity. If you think about it, many of these things are controlled in the name of, LEED certifications, trying to have sustainable and being responsible about our use of energy and technology. So a lot of things are remote controlled, both for maintenance, but also to make sure that you reduce your carbon footprint. What better way to get a big payday than to go after what they may perceive to be a weaker link?
Yeah, you throw out a couple different motivations there that hackers may have. I think everybody just assumes a hack is going to be a ransomware kind of an issue, but it's not. There are multiple motivations. But we got to back up a little bit because I want to ask you about the perception of a hacker. I think most of it's shaped by the media. We think it's this person in a dark hood running tons of code. That's what a hacker is. Is a hacker or hackers, is that a team that's well funded? Is it someone just trying to cause trouble? Who is this? And is the solution to harden security? Like if you had to pick one, I understand probably a multifaceted approach here, but if you had to pick one, is it hardening security because you're against these big teams? Or is it training your people to look for phishing? Because I think, if I'm not wrong, most of hacking is human engineering, right? What do we prioritize?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's interesting. So the term hacker can have good connotations and negative connotations, right? So Hollywood and TV, they give it sort of a negative connotation. Think when you hear hacker, you think someone sitting in the dark. Maybe there's a green, eerie glow to the room. There's ones and zeros on a screen. It's very mysterious looking. And that's kind of one connotation, I guess, from a Hollywood perspective. But there is actually something called ethical hacking. So a hacker can actually be a good person who's saying, if I were to think like a criminal, this is what I would do to your systems. And here's all the different ways I found to get into your systems. So let's lock all the doors before a bad person with malicious intent finds these unlocked parts of your systems. So what I always tell people is whether you're battling fraudsters who are doing like identity theft or trying to do wire transfer fraud, or you're battling individual criminals that maybe they are a former insider and they want access to information because they have an axe to grind. Maybe you're doing hardened criminals who are sort of really good at their trade craft, but they might be lone wolf. Then you've got the cyber criminal syndicates, so they kind of have their own mafias. Many of them now are not as well organized and structured as they used to be in the past. A lot of them do basically hire, pay for performance, if you will. Here's your task, get it done. I get you paid. I don't care if you have a degree. I don't care if you're in your basement. I don't really care. Just get the job done and you'll get paid. Then you have the nation states, right? So you have people who, one degree of separation or are part of a nation state government operation and they've got a mission and they're operating a little bit tighter cells and units to go after that mission. It doesn't matter. What I really look at is these are all cousins on the same evildoer family tree. Okay. So just look
Yeah.
at them all like they're all on the same family tree. They're different branches of the family tree of evildoers. So many of the things that you can do proactively will work against all of them because they are cousins after all. So I always tell people like if you can only do one thing and you don't have a lot of money to spend or a lot of time, having those playbooks will tell you where you're exposed. And you can either try to think about insuring those or putting into your budget to start closing those different exposure areas. Or you could change processes, have maybe some manual processes if you can't afford the technology investment. Then the next thing, step 2, is to look for some of the easier things that you can do that'll give you the highest impact for doing them. One of those, I know it's clunky. I know people don't like it, but multi-factor authentication. The
Ugh.
reason why I know. This is like kind of right now, it's still one of the most unsexy things you can do is put in multi-factor authentication. But let me tell you something about why it's so important. Credential stuffing is a thing. Going all the cousins on that evildoer family tree, they go to the data dumps of all past data breaches. They pull the passwords out, they pull the emails out, they pull the usernames out and the account access out. And then they start figuring out how many times do you get to have a failed login attempt before you get locked out? Oh, is it 2? Okay, I'll try 2 a day. I'll try 1 a day, whatever it is. And I'll just keep trying different iterations of your last password. People are creatures of habits. They know people will do
Yeah.
spring 2024 exclamation point, summer 2024 exclamation point, or something like that. So then they'll start playing around and try to do account takeover that way. Credential stuffing is a very popular go-to technique for all the cousins on the evildoer family tree. Multi-factor authentication prevents 90% of credential stuffing attacks. There are very few things that have that high hit rate. So if you're like, Theresa, I don't have time, I don't have money, I can't focus on this. I can only do one thing. What would that one thing be? After having your playbooks, demand multi-factor authentication everywhere you get it. I know it's inconvenient. I know it's clunky. I know it's annoying. It's getting better. And that extra couple of minutes or seconds that it takes to have to do multi-factor authentication, it will pay off for you in the long run.
And this brings up a good point, and it's always this battle between executives, especially marketing people, right? I used to be in a marketing role. I remember that, in marketing nowadays, you're on even media these days, you're on a very, very short cycle. So the worst thing is when you're trying to get something done and IT's like, we don't allow for that. Please wait for 1 week and a handwritten carrier pigeon note for you to do this basic function. And I'll admit, there's always this fight between efficiency and safety. If executives had their way, it'd probably be no firewalls at all. Do whatever I want and go fix it if it breaks. But if IT had their way, if we're all honest, cybersecurity people had their way, CIOs had their way, they'd probably just say, you know what? Everyone has no privileges. I'm cutting all the hard lines, no Wi-Fi, and you're all going to be locked in your offices. And so do we have to have it one way or the other? Or is there this, like you mentioned, two-factor authentication? What are we supposed to do? How are executives supposed to balance efficiency and safety effectively?
First of all, start with a technology and security partner that will focus on this. So Everybody just trust me, I know the way out, okay? And so from the standpoint
I
of
read your book though, and I'm not supposed to trust anybody, so I don't know what to do right now,
it's true, but
Theresa.
I mean, you could as long as I'm not a deep fake right now. I don't know. Can you trust me?
I don't
Let me
know.
give proof of life,
I
right?
don't know.
But
Hold up a
the
newspaper.
but one of the things that I would say is the reason why we have this issue is many of us in the technology and especially in the security realm, we forget about the human user story. We skip to the end. We say, I've got these frameworks, I have these regulatory burdens. I mean, and for good reason. We have a lot of things on our shoulder that we have to be accountable for and a lot of people to be accountable to. And oftentimes, the human user story, what the executive is trying to get done or the employee is trying to get done, is actually so far down the list, we never get to pick our head up and say, well, how does this impact the user? Can we create a seamless, elegant experience here? And you feel that. And that's why you had to do a workaround to do what? To get your job done. Not because you were trying to have a side hustle or trying to put the company at risk. You were trying to get your job done. So, what I would say is ask your technology and security partner, can we spend some time talking about the human user story? I need you to really understand what I do before I engage technology, what I do after I'm done engaging the technology, because there's more to me than just sitting in front of a keyboard or a phone and typing something or responding to something or reacting to something. And if we spent more time understanding that human user story, then on the technology and security side, we could identify those thin spaces where those cousins on that evildoer family tree are trying to get in between us and you as the human in that story. And the reason why we have to do this is because all variety of criminals, the one thing they're incredibly good at is they're going to guess what you and I are going to do before we know we're going to do it. They know, for example, this is how companies do wire transfers, and here's their protocols. They know, for example, if somebody gets an email from the boss, they're going to click on a link or open an attachment. They know, for example, if a customer is complaining that they should please the customer. They know our human user story better than we do. In fact, they could teach a master class in it. And because of that, that's how they're so successful in getting in. So we have to turn the tables on them. And if we study the human user story and then we study how they exploit the human user story, then we can figure out through people, process, and technology how to build security so it's a safety net. Like, Olaf says, I like warm hugs, right? In Frozen. Like, we got to create this warm hug around the user. That's how we create seamless security experiences. And because we don't focus enough on that, because you're last, the human user story is last, if it even gets discussed at all. That's why cyber criminals can be so successful.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's not about, hear me out, Theresa, but it's not about the cybersecurity professional's agenda. It's not really about the executive's agenda, although they're responsible for vision and mission, obviously. But at the end of the day, it's responsible for, wait a minute, hold up. What is the goal of this particular project, this business unit, this quarter? And bringing the cybersecurity experts, I might even say legal. Legal's probably out there screaming too. Bringing in the key players early and saying, here is the objective. The objective at the end of the day is not to protect the organization, although that's your job. The agenda is to get 10% more customers this year or roll this new product out. And so, how can IT, how can the necessary players work with marketing, work with product development, whoever, to achieve the goal? Bringing people in early and then kind of making them your co-conspirator. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and it's all about storyboards. And even if you don't have the luxury of there's new things going on, you can always take the storyboards of what you have today. That's actually going to tell you your blind spots.
Last question, because just last like minute here. But one of the things that you write a lot about is manipulation, and so obviously internal employees. Since this is the context of this show is not the context of government, you talk a lot about that too. But since the context here is like internal employees possibly being manipulated from various attacks to give up maybe private IP, isn't in some ways, maybe we can look, I guess maybe we can look to politics and the media, which are record, like I think Congress and the media right now, according to Gallup, have like record low trust rankings. And so when trust is really low and when there's a trust vacuum, doesn't that make it easier for manipulators and people to create misinformation that's believable? Is the solution to that, like the core solution to all of this, hey executives, hey leaders, be as truthful as possible all the time so you don't give employees a reason to get information from outside?
Yeah, you bring up a great point. And what was really interesting in doing my research for the book the first time, and it's now in second edition, so two rounds of extensive research, is many of the groups behind propaganda campaigns, whether it's social media manipulation or other. A big part of what they want to accomplish is making you feel like you can't trust what you read, what you see, what you hear.
Yeah.
Because if you don't trust anything, it leaves you open to believing anything. And that's where they swoop in. So if there is a trust vacuum with media, with executives, with an industry, if there's a trust vacuum, it will be filled, mark my words, with manipulation campaign experts. Now, some of them would say, I'm a force for good. I'm just trying to make sure, people are aware. So some people think they're well-intended and they've got only the most positive intentions, but it still is a manipulation campaign, whether you think you have good intentions or not. I mean, believe me, some of the nation state operations of Russia think they have the best of intentions. They want to disrupt America so that we will not, support Ukraine. And so they think they have the best of intentions too. So I think what you have to go down to is whether you think you're well intended or not, the key is we need to continue to support and give people grace and space for critical thinking skills. So the more you can do with your own organization to focus on critical thinking skills. So in that moment of them being socially engineered, seeing misinformation about the industry, the company, a vendor supplier, a leader, whatever it is, that they can apply those critical thinking skills. It could mean the difference between your company being socially engineered and compromised and not. But that's what we're dealing with here, is that people who have sort of a cause to push, whether it's for good or for bad, is up for debate. If they can make you feel like nobody's telling you the truth, then they leave people open to believing anything.
Yeah, I mean, this is the most cliche statement ever, but maybe it's true in this case, which is now more than ever, leaders, you have to be a rock of truth. Even though you think that truth might hurt the organization, it's sure as heck going to hurt it later if people find out you're lying to them. Need to be a rock. Theresa Payton, CEO of Fortalice Solutions and the first woman CIO in the White House, of course, under the George W. Bush administration. Thank you so much for coming on Tomorrowist. What's the website so people can find you?
Sure. So you can go to fortalicesolutions.com. And we have company accounts on LinkedIn and X. And if you want to follow me, I post tips on LinkedIn and on X. My handle on X is Tracker Payton.
Awesome. Theresa, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Before we say goodbye, I encourage you to subscribe to Tomorrowist wherever you get your podcasts. You can find all our episodes at shrm.org/Tomorrowist, and while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter. Thanks for listening, and remember, the workplace is changing rapidly. You don't have time to be a futurist. Be a Tomorrowist.